She thought no one would stop, until a mechanic changed everything. Rain hammered the windshield so hard it looked like the night itself was trying to erase her from existence. Maya's hands trembled on the steering wheel as the car sputtered, coughed, and finally died in the middle of the lonely highway. Not a streetlight in sight, only the stretch of wet asphalt disappearing into blackness. She turned the key again. Nothing but silence and rain. Her phone, dead. Her hope, fading fast. She leaned back in the seat, staring at the ceiling of the car, wondering if she was cursed or just foolish to think life could get better. Minutes passed, then a half hour, then an hour. Dozens of cars zoomed by, headlights flashing, tires slicing through puddles, but not one slowed. Not one stopped. She hugged herself, whispering, "I guess I really am alone." Maya had been running on more than just low fuel. She was running from a life that had been draining her for years. Growing up in a house where shouting was more common than breathing, she had carried survival like a backpack filled with bricks. When her father left and her mother drowned herself in self-pity and pills, Maya became the invisible caretaker, cleaning dishes at 14, working at 16, and apologizing for everyone else's mistakes by 18. Yet somehow, despite the emotional bruises, she had dreams. She wanted to start her own baking business, create something warm in a world that had always felt cold. But life had laughed. Her fiancé had seemed like a way out at first. Charming, successful, saying all the right things. But charm can turn to control and softness can become sharp edges overnight. In the last year, she'd lost count of the times he'd belittled her, guilted her, or told her she'd be nothing without him. Tonight was the night she left for good. She packed her bag, took the old car she'd bought with her own savings, and drove into the storm, hoping the world outside would be kinder than the one inside those walls. But now, stranded and soaked in despair, she wondered if she'd made a mistake. Maybe no one really cared. Maybe she wasn't meant to be rescued. Then, a pair of headlights slowed. For a moment, she didn't believe it. The vehicle pulled over on the shoulder a few yards ahead. She hesitated, fear and hope colliding in her chest. The driver door opened, and a man stepped out, holding a flashlight and wearing a dark jacket. He walked slowly, not with arrogance, but with caution, making sure she saw him before he came close. "You okay in there?" His voice called through the rain, deep and steady. She lowered her window a crack, heart pounding. "My car just died," she managed to say. "And my phone's dead too." He nodded, shining the light briefly over the hood. "I'm Noah. I'm a mechanic. I was heading back from a night shift. Mind if I take a look?" Normally, Maya didn't trust men just because they were polite. But something about his tone was different. Not pushy, not dismissive, just calm. She unlocked the door, stepping out into the rain with him. As she stood shivering, he popped the hood and checked a few things with practiced hands. "Starter's gone," he finally said over the downpour. "And your battery connections are loose. I can't fix it fully here, but I have my tow truck 5 minutes down the road. I'll bring it and get you out of here." She blinked, unsure whether to believe a stranger making a promise in the middle of nowhere. "Why stop?" she asked quietly. "Everyone else just drove by." He paused for a moment before answering, rain trailing down his face. "Because I've been the person nobody stopped for before." He drove to get his tow truck while she waited inside her car, watching the road with cautious optimism. He did come back. Not 10 minutes later, but 7, and carefully hooked up her car. As he worked, he asked, "You got somewhere safe to stay tonight?" The question almost made her laugh. Safe had never been part of her vocabulary. "Not really," she admitted. "I left my place tonight. I just needed to get away. I don't know where I'm going yet." He didn't pry. He just nodded once and said, "I know a shop nearby. My sister runs the office there. We keep a small break room. You don't have to decide anything now, but at least get warm first." They arrived at his auto shop, a modest but well-kept garage on the edge of a small town. He unlocked the door and led her inside where the heater hummed faintly. He handed her a clean towel and a spare hoodie that smelled faintly of engine oil and detergent. His sister, Elena, soon arrived after he called her. She brought hot tea and blankets without asking any questions. Maya didn't know whether to cry or sleep. Her body chose both. She fell asleep sitting on the small couch in the break room, tears silently drying on her face. In the morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a washed sky. Maya woke to the smell of fresh coffee and the sight of Noah sitting at the small table, working on some paperwork. He glanced up with a warm but respectful nod. "Good morning. Your car's in the bay. I'll try to get it running today. If you need to make calls or rest more, take your time." She'd expected awkwardness, maybe judgment, but instead she felt seen. Not for her mistakes, not for her fear, but simply as someone trying to survive. Over the next few days, the shop became a temporary shelter. While fixing her car, Noah talked to her, not in grand speeches, but in real, quiet sentences that carried weight. She learned he had grown up with little, that he'd worked since he was 15, and that he'd once been stranded on a night like hers, waiting for help that never came. He said that night planted something in him, a promise that if he ever saw someone else in need, he wouldn't ignore it. Elena, kind and sharp-witted, helped Maya look for temporary housing and even gave her a part-time job answering calls at the front desk. For the first time in years, Maya felt useful without feeling used. One evening, as she was closing up the front office, Noah came in wiping grease off his hands. "I fixed the starter and battery," he said. "Your car's ready anytime." She should have felt relief, but instead her heart twisted. Leaving meant returning to the unknown. He seemed to sense it. "You don't have to decide tonight," he said gently. "And you don't owe me anything. Just don't disappear without saying goodbye." As days turned into a week, she began to open up. To him, to herself, to the idea that maybe kindness wasn't always a trap. He never asked for her whole story, but one night, she told it anyway. About the loneliness, the fiancé who controlled her, the dreams she'd buried. When she said, "I thought no one would stop," he looked at her with quiet conviction and said, "Sometimes people don't see the pain. Sometimes they choose not to. But that doesn't mean you don't matter." His words cracked something open in her, not pain, but possibility. Elena suggested Maya rent a small room in town. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She continued working at the shop while exploring ways to start her baking business. Noah would sometimes come in from the garage with a streak of oil on his cheek, asking her opinion about a sandwich or joking about how he ruined every recipe he touched. Their bond was slow and unforced, built on respect and shared silence rather than dramatic declarations. Weeks later, as autumn leaves turned the roads copper and gold, Maya stood outside the shop with a box of freshly baked muffins she'd made for the crew. She saw Noah under a car, humming a tune she didn't recognize. When he stood up, wiping his hands, she realized something had changed inside her, something simple and profound. Not dependency, not desperation, but gratitude and hope, woven together with something stronger than fear. She never forgot that night on the highway, the roar of passing cars, her whispered belief that no one would stop. But she also never forgot the moment one set of headlights slowed, and one man chose to see her. Not as a burden, not as a stranger, but as a human being worth helping. Over time, she did start her small baking business, first from home, then from a rented kitchen with Elena's help and Noah's silent encouragement. She named it Second Chance Sweets, not because she was saved by a hero, but because someone stepped in when the world turned away. And she learned to do the same for others. The inspiring message she carried, and the one your viewers will feel deeply, is this: sometimes life doesn't change with a miracle. Sometimes it changes because one person decides to care when everyone else keeps driving. Hope doesn't always shout. Sometimes it arrives covered in engine grease, holding a flashlight in the rain. And that's where everything begins.